You are about to learn something simple, yet life-altering. Not a method, not a technique, not a formula that the human mind can manipulate, but a spiritual realization so profound that it dissolves the very idea of impossibility. Throughout history there have been healings that defied logic, circumstances that overturned medical verdicts, and transformations that left even witnesses speechless. These were not accidents. They were not miracles in the way the world defines miracles. They were the natural outcome of alignment with a higher law. At the heart of these healings were 4 quiet words. Words so gentle that the intellect often overlooks them, yet so powerful that when truly realized, they silence fear, dissolve limitation, and restore harmony. These words do not force healing, they reveal that healing has always been present. They do not battle disease, they expose disease as having no authority in the presence of truth. Most people approach healing from the outside in. They try to fix the body, correct the condition, or persuade God to intervene, but spiritual healing begins from the inside out. It begins with consciousness. When consciousness shifts, the body follows naturally, effortlessly, without struggle. This is why some healings appear instant, while others seem delayed. It is never about time, it is always about awareness. The 4 words are this: there is only God, not as a belief, not as a comforting statement, but as a living realization. When these words are deeply understood, they dismantle the false foundations upon which fear, sickness, and limitation stand. If there is only God, then there is no opposing power. If there is only God, then there is no separate force called disease with its own intelligence. If there is only God, then life is governed by harmony, not chaos. Most suffering continues because the mind is divided. On one side, we acknowledge God as all-powerful. On the other, we quietly accept disease, lack, or fear as equally real. This divided awareness produces conflict. But when the heart comes to rest in the truth that there is only one presence, one power, one life, the conflict ends. Healing is not produced, it is revealed. In this realization, something remarkable happens. The personal sense of responsibility dissolves. The pressure to make healing happen falls away. The one seeking healing steps back and divine order steps forward. This is why striving often delays healing while surrender accelerates it. Healing does not respond to effort. It responds to alignment. Stillness plays a vital role here. Not silence as the absence of noise, but inner stillness where thought stops arguing with truth. In that stillness, the body is no longer instructed by fear or memory. It begins to respond to a higher intelligence. Cells reorganize, functions normalize, pain loosens its grip, not because someone commanded it to leave, but because it was never sustained by truth in the first place. When awareness rests in, there is only God. The body is no longer seen as a separate mechanism that can malfunction on its own. It is understood as an expression of divine life, and divine life does not contain decay, obstruction, or disorder. These appear only when consciousness accepts separation as real. This is why spiritual healing does not focus on symptoms. Symptoms are effects, not causes. To fight an effect is to give it power. To recognize the one cause is to dissolve all false effects. When consciousness is filled with the awareness of God's allness, there is no mental space left for disease to occupy. Another profound shift happens when these 4 words are lived rather than repeated. Compassion replaces anxiety. Trust replaces fear. Patience replaces urgency. You no longer watch the body with suspicion, waiting for signs of improvement. You rest. And in that rest, healing unfolds naturally, often quietly, sometimes without dramatic moments, but always with lasting peace. It is important to understand that this realization does not deny human experience, it transcends it. Pain may seem real to the senses, but it is not ultimate. Medical opinions may appear authoritative, but they are not final. When divine law is recognized as the only law, human laws quietly step aside. This is not blind faith. It is spiritual understanding. Faith hopes, understanding knows, and knowing brings rest. The moment you stop asking, will this work for me, and instead rest in the truth of what already is, you have stepped into the atmosphere where healing is inevitable. The greatest healings have never come from intense concentration or emotional pleading. They came from surrender to what is eternally true. When the mind stops trying to help God and simply bears witness to God's presence, the impossible loses its meaning. You may not feel anything dramatic when this realization dawns. There may be no sensation, no sudden emotional rush, but there will be peace. And peace is the evidence that consciousness has aligned with truth. From that peace, the body follows. These 4 words are not something you use. They are something you live from. They become the foundation of your awareness, the lens through which you see yourself, your body, and your world. And from that place, healing is no longer extraordinary. It is natural. As you leave today, do not carry these words as a mental phrase. Let them become your inner posture. Let them quiet your fears. Let them dissolve your questions. Rest in them gently without effort. And you will discover that what once seemed impossible was never impossible at all. It was only waiting for recognition. The power of spiritual recognition over human effort lies in understanding that transformation does not originate in struggle, willpower, or intense mental concentration. Human effort assumes that something is missing and must be achieved, corrected, or forced into place, while spiritual recognition begins with the awareness that wholeness already exists. Effort works from the belief of separation, the idea that the individual stands apart from divine life and must reach toward it. Recognition dissolves the distance by awakening consciousness to what has always been present. When truth is recognized, there is no sense of making something happen. There is only the quiet yielding to what eternally is. Human effort often feels sincere and exhausting because it relies on the personal sense of self as the doer. This self carries fear, memory, diagnosis, and past failure, and then tries to produce healing or change through prayer, affirmation, or intense focus. Even spiritual effort can become another form of control when the mind attempts to direct, guard, or manipulate spiritual law. Spiritual recognition, however, removes the door entirely. It is the moment consciousness realizes that divine presence is not something to be invited but something to be acknowledged. In that acknowledgement, the burden of responsibility drops away, and with it the tension that sustains disorder. Recognition is not passive resignation, it is awakened awareness. It sees through appearances without fighting them. Where effort argues with symptoms, recognition sees beyond them. Where effort asks how long, recognition rests in timelessness. This shift is subtle but decisive. The body and circumstances respond not to words or techniques but to the state of consciousness governing them. When consciousness is aligned with truth, harmony expresses itself naturally, just as light dispels darkness without effort. This is why genuine spiritual healing often occurs when striving stops. The moment the mind releases its grip and stops trying to fix, persuade, or improve, it becomes receptive. Receptivity is not weakness, it is alignment. In receptivity, divine intelligence is no longer resisted by fear or personal opinion. Healing then unfolds as a revelation rather than an achievement. Spiritual recognition also frees one from self-judgment. Human effort constantly evaluates progress, asking whether enough faith has been exercised or enough right thinking has been applied. Recognition removes measurement altogether. There is nothing to earn and nothing to prove. Truth does not respond to intensity, it responds to openness. When awareness gently settles into the recognition of divine allness, the nervous urgency of effort dissolves, and peace becomes the dominant state. From this peace, change occurs without drama. Conditions adjust, relationships soften, and the body responds to the higher law governing it. What seemed immovable begins to yield, not because it was attacked, but because it was never sustained by truth. Spiritual recognition is the doorway through which divine order becomes visible, not by force, not by struggle, but by the simple awakening to what has always been governing life beneath appearances. Healing as a shift in consciousness rather than a physical process reveals that the body is not the origin of disease but the place where inner awareness expresses itself. What appears as sickness in the body is not created by matter itself but by the state of thought, belief, and perception held in consciousness. When consciousness is dominated by fear, separation, or identification with limitation, the body reflects that disturbance. When consciousness returns to harmony, the body naturally follows, because it is responsive, not independent. This understanding moves healing away from the struggle with symptoms and into the realm of spiritual awareness. Most approaches to healing focus on changing matter, adjusting chemistry, or correcting physical mechanisms. While these may address effects, they do not touch the deeper cause. Consciousness is the governing factor. The body is obedient to the mental and spiritual atmosphere in which it lives. A fearful mind creates tension, and tension eventually seeks an outlet. A peaceful mind releases that tension, allowing the body to re-enter its natural state of balance. Healing, therefore, is not something added to the body but something revealed when obstructive beliefs dissolve. A shift in consciousness occurs when attention moves away from the condition and rests in a higher awareness of life itself. Instead of constantly monitoring the body, checking symptoms, or rehearsing diagnosis, awareness turns inward and upward. This turning is not denial, it is reorientation. The focus is no longer on what appears wrong but on what is eternally right. As consciousness aligns with truth, the body loses the mental support that sustained the condition, and the condition begins to fade. This explains why some healings happen suddenly and others unfold gradually. The speed of healing is not determined by the severity of the condition but by the depth of the shift in awareness. A small but genuine realization can accomplish more than years of anxious effort. When consciousness fully releases its belief in a separate power called disease, the body responds immediately because there is nothing left to maintain the disorder. Healing as consciousness also removes fear of relapse. If healing were merely physical, it would always be vulnerable to return. But when the underlying awareness changes, the old pattern has no foundation to rebuild itself. The body is not healed and then left alone. It is continually sustained by a higher state of awareness. This is why spiritual healing carries with it a sense of peace and assurance, not just relief of symptoms. Another important aspect of this shift is the release of personal control. As long as healing is viewed as a physical process, the individual feels responsible to manage it. When healing is understood as a movement of consciousness, responsibility gives way to trust. The individual no longer tries to direct the process but allows divine order to express itself. This allowance is not passive, it is intelligent yielding to a higher law. When consciousness rests in harmony, the body responds effortlessly. There is no struggle between mind and matter, no battle to win. Healing becomes a natural outcome of alignment rather than a goal to achieve. In this way, healing is not an event, but a revelation of the life that has always been whole beneath every appearance. The 4 words as a doorway into divine awareness point to the moment when thought stops searching and begins resting in spiritual reality. These words are not powerful because of their sound or repetition, but because of the consciousness they awaken. They do not function as an affirmation meant to convince the mind. They serve as a recognition that dissolves mental noise and reveals what has always been present. When these words are truly received, awareness shifts from effort to acknowledgement, from questioning to quiet knowing. A doorway does not take you somewhere new, it allows you to enter what already exists. In the same way, these 4 words open awareness to divine presence without creating it. They bring the mind to a halt, stopping the endless activity of analyzing, fearing and predicting. The human mind is accustomed to complexity, but spiritual truth is simple. The simplicity of these words disarms the intellect and allows deeper perception to emerge. As awareness rests in this recognition, separation begins to dissolve. The sense of being a fragile individual facing external forces gradually gives way to the realization of unity. This unity is not emotional or symbolic, it is experiential. One begins to feel governed rather than vulnerable, supported rather than threatened. In this state, divine awareness is no longer an idea about God but a felt presence shaping perception itself. This doorway also leads away from self-centered prayer. Instead of asking for change, consciousness aligns with what is already true. There is no attempt to persuade or bargain. The need to explain the problem disappears because attention is no longer fixed on the problem. Divine awareness fills the field of thought so completely that opposing concepts lose their power. Darkness does not need to be removed, it vanishes when light is acknowledged. Another effect of entering this doorway is the quieting of fear. Fear depends on the belief in multiple powers and uncertain outcomes. When awareness rests in the understanding of one presence, fear has no structure to stand on. The body senses this shift immediately. Muscles relax, breathing deepens, and the nervous system releases its vigilance. Healing often begins here, not because something has been commanded, but because resistance has ended. The doorway into divine awareness also reshapes identity. One no longer identifies primarily as a body with spiritual hopes, but as spiritual life expressing itself through a body. This reversal is subtle yet transformative. Problems that once felt personal now appear impersonal and temporary. They are no longer carried as burdens but observed as dissolving illusions. This shift removes emotional weight from the condition, allowing the body to respond without pressure. Living from this doorway means returning to these words not as a ritual but as an inner orientation. They become a way of seeing rather than a phrase to remember. Over time this awareness stabilizes and life is approached with greater trust and less urgency. Decisions become calmer, reactions soften, and healing unfolds as a natural byproduct of alignment. The 4 words do not promise instant results, they invite continual awareness. Each time consciousness rests in them, it steps out of conflict and into harmony. In that harmony, divine life reveals itself without obstruction, and what once seemed distant becomes immediate, intimate, and quietly powerful. Stillness as the atmosphere where healing unfolds points to a state of inner quiet in which the restless activity of the human mind settles and makes room for higher awareness. This stillness is not created by force, concentration, or withdrawal from life, but by the gentle release of mental resistance. When thought stops struggling to understand, fix, or control, a deeper intelligence becomes perceptible. Healing does not enter this stillness, it is revealed within it. Because stillness removes the noise that obscures what is already whole. Most inner conflict arises from continuous mental commentary. The mind replays symptoms, fears outcomes, and measures progress, unknowingly sustaining the very condition it wants to escape. Stillness interrupts this cycle. In stillness, thought no longer feeds the condition with attention or belief. The absence of mental agitation allows consciousness to rest in the present moment, where fear has no future to project and pain has no narrative to maintain itself. This atmosphere of stillness is not emptiness, it is full, alive, and aware. It carries a sense of presence that feels supportive rather than demanding. Within it, there is no pressure to heal or improve. This absence of pressure is crucial, because pressure is rooted in fear. When fear subsides, the body is no longer held in defensive patterns. Muscles relax, circulation improves, and natural rhythms reassert themselves without instruction. Stillness also neutralizes the false authority of appearances. Symptoms often speak loudly, demanding attention and interpretation. In stillness, their voice weakens. They are no longer analyzed or resisted. They are simply allowed to pass through awareness without meaning. This lack of reaction deprives them of influence. Healing then unfolds not as a dramatic event but as a quiet rebalancing. Another important aspect of stillness is trust. When one becomes still, there is an implicit surrender of personal control. This surrender is not defeat but confidence in a higher order. The need to know how healing will occur disappears. Questions fall away because stillness itself carries assurance. In this state, the body is no longer treated as a problem to solve but as an expression of life that knows how to restore itself when interference ends. Stillness also sharpens spiritual perception. Intuition becomes clearer, and insight arises without effort. Guidance comes not as loud instruction but as gentle knowing. This guidance may lead to changes in lifestyle, relationships, or thought patterns, but these changes arise naturally without strain. They feel right rather than forced, aligned rather than imposed. Living in stillness does not mean withdrawing from activity. It means carrying inner quiet into activity. One can move, speak, and act while remaining inwardly at rest. From this place, reactions soften, patience increases, and compassion flows more freely. The nervous urgency that once drove action is replaced by calm responsiveness. Healing flourishes in this atmosphere because stillness is the natural state of harmony. It is the ground where divine order is most easily recognized. When consciousness rests here, the body aligns with the peace governing it, and transformation occurs without struggle, without fear, and without the need to make anything happen, revealing that stillness itself is not an absence of power, but the presence of the highest order of life. Releasing personal will to allow spiritual law to operate is one of the most challenging yet liberating shifts in spiritual healing. Personal will is driven by the belief that the individual must direct outcomes, protect the body, and manage life through effort and decision. While this sense of control appears responsible, it often carries fear beneath it. Fear fuels the need to control, and control blocks the natural flow of spiritual law. When personal will relaxes, fear loses its foundation, and a higher intelligence is given space to act. Personal will tries to heal by deciding how healing should look and when it should occur. It measures progress, compares results, and becomes discouraged when expectations are not met. This constant evaluation keeps consciousness focused on lack rather than wholeness. Releasing personal will does not mean abandoning care or wisdom. It means releasing the belief that the limited mind knows the best outcome. Spiritual law operates beyond human planning. It restores harmony according to principles that are already complete and perfect. When personal will steps aside, prayer changes in character. It no longer asks for specific results or timelines. Instead, it becomes an attitude of openness and listening. This inner listening is powerful because it aligns awareness with divine intelligence rather than human opinion. In this alignment, thought becomes less assertive and more receptive. Receptivity allows spiritual law to act without interference. One of the reasons personal will resists release is the fear of passivity. The mind worries that without effort, nothing will happen. In reality, the opposite is true. Excessive effort often delays healing because it keeps consciousness engaged with the problem. When effort relaxes, attention naturally shifts toward harmony. The body responds to this shift because it is no longer being directed by anxiety or expectation. Releasing personal will also dissolve self-blame. When healing is seen as something the individual must accomplish, failure feels personal. When spiritual law is trusted, there is no room for guilt or pressure. Healing is understood as the expression of a higher order, not a test of personal worth or faith. This understanding brings relief to the mind and softness to the heart, creating an inner environment where healing can occur naturally. Another transformation that occurs is patience. Personal will demands quick results. Spiritual law unfolds according to perfect timing, not human urgency. When this timing is trusted, impatience fades. One becomes more present, less focused on future outcomes. This presence is healing in itself because it removes stress from the system. As personal will releases its grip, life begins to feel supported rather than managed. Decisions arise with clarity, actions feel guided, and outcomes align without struggle. The body reflects this ease through relaxation and balance. Healing then becomes a cooperative unfolding rather than a personal battle. Allowing spiritual law to operate does not require constant reminders or effort. It requires willingness to trust, to listen, and to rest in the awareness that life is governed by intelligence far greater than personal control. In this yielding, harmony is not forced into existence. It emerges naturally, quietly, and steadily, revealing that surrender is not weakness but alignment with the deepest power sustaining all life. Living from truth rather than reacting to appearances requires a profound reorientation of perception. Appearances speak to the senses and insist on immediate attention. They present symptoms, circumstances, and conditions as facts that demand response. Truth, however, is not what appears, it is what eternally is. When life is approached from appearances, reactions are automatic and emotional. Fear arises, conclusions are drawn, and behavior is shaped by what seems visible and urgent. Living from truth interrupts this reflex and establishes consciousness in a deeper, steadier awareness. Truth is not discovered through analysis of conditions but through inner recognition. It reveals that life is governed by spiritual law, not by fluctuating material evidence. When one lives from truth, appearances are not denied, but they are no longer granted authority. A symptom may appear, yet it is not immediately labeled as dangerous or permanent. A circumstance may look limiting, yet it is not assumed to define the future. This suspension of judgment is powerful because judgment gives appearances their force. Reacting to appearances binds consciousness to time. The mind projects past experiences into the present and anticipates future outcomes, creating anxiety. Living from truth brings awareness into the present moment, where divine order is active. In the present, fear loses its grip because it depends on imagined outcomes. The body senses this shift and responds by releasing tension that was created by anticipation and worry. Another aspect of living from truth is the refinement of inner dialogue. Instead of mentally arguing with conditions or rehearsing worst-case scenarios, thought becomes quieter and more observant. There is a gentle insistence on what is spiritually real rather than what is visibly alarming. This insistence is not verbal or forceful. It is an inner alignment that gradually reshapes perception. Over time, reactions soften and responses become calmer and wiser. Living from truth also transforms relationships with others. When appearances govern perception, people are seen through the lens of behavior, history, or personality. When truth governs perception, individuals are seen as expressions of the same life and intelligence. This shift reduces conflict and increases compassion. The body reflects this harmony because emotional conflict often manifests physically. In moments of challenge, living from truth means pausing before responding. This pause creates space for higher awareness to guide action. Instead of reacting impulsively, one listens inwardly. Guidance arises naturally, often as a sense of peace or clarity rather than words. Actions taken from this place carry less struggle and produce more harmonious outcomes. Over time, living from truth becomes less of a practice and more of a way of being. One no longer has to remind oneself constantly. Awareness stabilizes. Appearances still arise, but they no longer dominate. They are seen as passing phenomena rather than ultimate realities. This perspective brings freedom from emotional extremes and physical stress. The greatest gift of living from truth is consistency. Circumstances may change, but inner stability remains. This stability supports the body, the mind, and daily life in subtle yet powerful ways. Healing flows from this foundation because the body responds to the dominant state of consciousness. When truth governs awareness, appearances lose their power to dictate experience, and life unfolds from a deeper order that remains intact regardless of surface conditions. In conclusion, the journey toward understanding the 4 words that made the impossible possible is a journey inward, beyond effort, appearances, and fear. It reveals that true healing and transformation are not achieved through struggle, techniques, or human control, but through shifts in consciousness, recognition of divine presence, stillness, surrender, and living from truth. Each principle, spiritual recognition over human effort, healing as a shift in consciousness, the doorway opened by the 4 words, the atmosphere of stillness, releasing personal will, and aligning with truth, points to the same reality that life is governed by an intelligence far greater than the individual mind, and when consciousness aligns with it, what once seemed impossible becomes natural and effortless. The body, mind, and spirit respond not because they are commanded, but because they are expressions of the same life that is already whole. The essence of this teaching is simple yet profound. Stop striving, quiet the mind, release fear, recognize what is real, and rest in the presence of divine order. In doing so, healing unfolds, not as an extraordinary event, but as the natural revelation of life that has always been perfect, whole, and ready to express itself fully. The impossible is made possible the moment awareness shifts to what eternally is, and in that shift, true freedom, peace, and restoration are found.